All right. Welcome, Seven Seas. No one actually knows Seven Seas' real name, so we'll just call him Seven Seas. It's close enough. And so welcome to Radiant Creators, radiantcreators.com. And then Seven Seas, let's see, where's your, um, I guess you have your Substack. So on Substack at Seven Seas, seven number SEES, that's a good spot. Is that kind of a good landing spot for people to find all your stuff? You're also, of course, if you search Seven Seas on, Rumble or X or YouTube, you're going to find your content there as well. And of course, it's in the show notes when this is public.
Absolutely. I would say that I'm most active on X, just because it seems like that's where I get the most success with my visibility. I really need to dust the Substack off because I'm not there as much as I should be. I
Mm.
probably have like 40 drafts right now that I'm just like, are they too long? Is it too short? Should I do a part two? Like, ready to
Oh
go. But
wow.
yeah,
Wow, 40 drafts on Substack. That's amazing. Well, I know I have found that perfection has screwed up more of my projects than failure. So
yeah.
I know failure is easy. Success, that's the problem. Um, well, so you do amazing work. And so for people who are not familiar with you, I mean, you can certainly introduce yourself, but I'll just throw it out there that one of the things that really draws me to Seven Seas work is that, well, he does extraordinarily long live streams that where he researches and the audience is right there. It's live and they're in, so it's interactive. People are helping him build these amazing webs of connectivity. And when you start to dive into these, it is, I love visual representations. Like I love infographics. They're great. And so the webs that you're making, which I don't know how you even keep track of them, they're so massive, but they're right there. You're making them live. And then, of course, you reference them after the fact, and they're
Hmm.
constantly growing. And it's an interactive experience with the community.
Hmm.
And it, I'll just leave it at that. Like that's one of the things that really draws me to your work is that visual representation and all the connectivity and that database that you're building, which I think you. I'm sure somebody else is doing something like it, but I think you're the only one who's really doing it, growing it, and doing it the way you're doing it, and in a way that really is approachable for people to go, wow, look at this connectivity. Now I'm starting to understand how the world works. So I'll pass it to
Absolutely.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, so the way that that sort of like came about was sometime last year I started looking into Peter Thiel. I actually didn't know who he was before 2024.
Mm.
Um, and as soon as I found his name, I started seeing like all the things that he's funded and been connected to. And I was like typing it out, writing it out, and I was like, this is way too much to keep track of because I would have like paragraphs this long that were just like venture capitals that he seeded or something like that. So I said, what if I just start organizing it with like a web or a mind map or something? And found this program called Obsidian that I use. It is free, open source, and I don't own it or anything. So please, anyone that wants to do something similar to this, download it, try it out, and join in. And essentially, once I started to map everything out and then zoom out, I essentially had this like epiphany of, oh wow, this is like big picture stuff, and like seeing it all really drove home like how interconnected not only he is but everything else to each other. A lot of people say that it's like this, like you're playing six ways to bacon or like guilt by association, but then those same people will turn around and demand like the Epstein list, and I'm like, wait a second,
Mm-hmm.
that's also guilt by association. And that's just the way the world kind of works. They fraternize with each other, and they'll go to like the same universities and become friends and then go into business together or whatever that looks like. And I started sharing the webs, and people liked them a lot. And I very quickly realized that it's like way too much work for one person. So I opened it up to my community, and
Yeah.
I was like, hey, if there's things I'm missing, overlooking, things that maybe I don't understand fully that I have mapped out just as like a factual thing, but there's a deeper story there. And I've learned so much from like my community, regular like anonymous people that would otherwise not have any sort of voice to get certain information and things like that out there. And really, just I got to give it to them because people have basically joined and helped me out, and I've gotten way more support than I ever anticipated. And it just seems to be a group of like-minded people that are just tired of being lied to, and they just want the truth, and they want, to figure it out together.
Yeah, it does seem like a evolution of social media, because I
Yeah.
think that a lot of things are very, very worn out at this point, and that really is a community architecture, community venture, and the live streams are great. And one thing I like is you did one. You have one that you kind of you kind of compressed it, and I think it was called like the Technocrats, and what'd you call it? It's a recent YouTube, and it's on X, I think, as well, or maybe it's just on X. But it's where you summarized your one of your longer live streams,
Hmm.
and that was awesome, because like I like the live stream, but some are like 4 hours long or five
Oh
hours
yeah.
long, and sometimes it's cool to hang out and listen to it, maybe over a couple days or one day or whatever, marathon it. One of the nice things is you can always, like on YouTube and other platforms, you can say double speed, 3 speed, and you can kind of, compress it, which is really useful. I've kind of gotten used to listening things at like 3x, which is
Hmm.
probably, I don't know if that's evolution or devolution, but, you know, um, and so those are great. But I love the compressed one that you did. Is that you think that's something you might like continue doing? Is like take like the big show and then kind of just like compress it as a summary and put that up on X or something? Or is that something you've thought of? Or
Yeah.
that's a lot of work.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. What I was kind of getting into the habit of doing when I first started was at the end of the stream, then summarizing like everything that we went over. So I would
Yeah.
go back to all those connections and just do it very, very rapid fire instead of like the research in between or reading or
Yeah.
anything like that. I very quickly realized that it works really well when I first start the webs, but once I start getting into like part twos, I kind of forget what was added, during this stream versus the last one, and it gets really messy.
Yeah.
But I would love to find a way to like roll them out in sections and be a little more methodical about it, and that's something that I've kind of been spitballing with for the future.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because it's a tremendous amount of data, and it grows as you do the live stream. So you never exactly know what's going to happen, because
Yeah.
you're getting a lot of feedback from people, and that's something that you hadn't thought of. And then this creates a new avenue that you have to look down. So yeah, it's one of the fun things about the live streams, of course, is actually just seeing this. Um, so and you're also, you're using Linux, right?
Yeah.
I thought yeah, today we're actually using an alternative location here in the studio because, well, it's like 115 out, I think, right now. We're here in Scottsdale, so the Sonoran Desert, and the summer here, it's not a big deal, but it gets a little crazy. And this is a nice, room in the house that's cool. And also, this is where the my little Linux workstation is. So I thought, you
Nice.
know what, it's I'll go to the cooler room and I'll be in solidarity with Seven Seas, and we'll, rock Linux together. And
I love that.
yeah. So what does I use Pop OS, the like
Okay.
system. Do you, which one do you like?
I use Mint, the
Mint?
cinnamon distro.
Oh,
Pop
cool.
OS and Mint were the two that I was like, I don't know which one to go with. They're both great for different reasons, the same reasons. And so really, it was just kind of a coin toss.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. For me, it's like it often just ends up being the one that like installs the easiest and works with the
Yeah.
hardware that I have. I'm like, because I do have like, gosh, I think 35 years in the IT industry, and
Okay.
so I'm like, I'm 55, so I've been around for a little while, and so I've done, back in my day, you install Linux with 80 floppy disks. So I've
Yeah.
done like a lot of stuff with it, but at this point, the thrill is gone, and I just want that shit to work. I don't care.
Yeah. I will say compatibility is still a huge problem. They don't want to show love to Linux for some reason. I used to be
Yeah.
like a big gamer, and I've
Hmm.
kind of had to like impromptu retire that hobby completely because 50% of games don't even work on Linux.
Yeah, and you can use that's one thing about System 76, or Pop OS as they call it.
Hmm.
It does have the Lutris. It does have the whole like wine integration, so you can run. And so this will run pretty much any game that I've tried,
Nice.
which is kind of nice, and it really runs pretty fine. But yeah, you kind of need your dedicated Windows machine for gaming because they don't even show Mac a lot of love either. So
Yeah.
yeah, and so that's one thing I thought just for fun. How do you feel about, let's see, like when it comes to using Linux? Like I kind of like Linux because then I feel like like I'm not saying that like, oh, now everything is hardened and I'm secure and all this. It's like, no, but I mean, at least I do have some idea of what the kernel is. I know how it
Hmm.
works. I would kind of know if I was being exploited. I'm not like so much worried about what's on it, but it's between here and the point of presence that I'm going to, my internet provider or whatever. So I'm not saying it creates greater, privacy online. It'd be very easy if somebody was watching to see, oh, look, he's on StreamYard right now.
Yeah.
Oh, look, he's checking his email. So after the fact, they're kind of all the same,
Yeah.
but at least here I have some certainty, some cautious certainty that I'm just not straight up backdoored. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is yeah, go ahead.
It gives you a lot of like agency that I've found
Mm,
where like Windows, you have automatic updates, you have like compatibility stuff, their NET framework, and all these background processes. Really, the number one thing that sort of finally drove me to make the switch was when Microsoft announced that they were incorporating Copilot into their
mm,
OS, and I was like, oh, AI and OS, no, I'm good. I'm leaving. Bill Gates
yeah.
finally pushed me away.
Oh, I understand. Yeah. And when people have done kind of like audits where you're putting your Windows machine behind a firewall kind of both ways, and then you're monitoring the transactions that it's doing out, I
Hmm.
mean it's not so great. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, because you really don't know when you look at the processes that are running, etc. um, without filtering, which I'm just not going to do. I'm not going to do a firewall both ways. That's kind of a pain. I guess I could, but in general. But then again, it's a different topic. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's trying to like harness Windows or Mac OS is a little better, but trying to like keep Windows on the level,
Yep.
it's just not worth it. I just go Linux and then I don't have to pay for it, and I'd rather struggle now and then with Linux, and it's always good to play less games anyway,
Yeah.
and and
Absolutely.
and just be like, all right. So you're recently new on iconic.com, and that's David Icke's. He put that together, right? Or he's part of it.
Yeah.
It's ICKONIC. So iconic, as in David
Yeah.
Icke, iconic. So how'd you get involved with that, and how's that going?
That is actually a funny story. So,
Hmm.
early or like later in the year last year, there's this creator named Ian Carroll, and a lot of people know about him. I think especially because of his BlackRock work and like breaking down who owns what in the grocery stores and stuff. And I was a huge fan of that content. And then I slowly started to see that he was like coming out speaking positively about Trump and Elon Musk. And I was like, whoa, no, wait, dude, no, you don't understand. They're tied to like all of these Zionist causes and Peter Thiel and things like that. And so I've gone back and forth with him a few times, and a lady on there named on Iconic named Kristen Bidding. She ended up seeing some of my content where I was calling out Ian for basically misleading people into supporting really the government in general, but specifically the Trump administration. And we kind of bonded back and forth. And she was like, "Hey, I love the research and stuff that you're using to call this guy out. Would you maybe want to come talk about like Peter Thiel and Palantir and stuff on my show?"
Hmm.
And I was, tickled because that was like the first time I ever got invited to anything.
Yeah.
And me and her had a great back and forth. And then Richard Willett, who was like one of the founding members of Iconic, he invited me onto his show, and that went really well. So from there, Jamie Ike, David Icke's son, reached out and was like, "Hey, do you want to do like a series on our website?" And I said, "Absolutely." So I ended up basically agreeing with them to do sort of like a 10 episode series that kind of covers like various facets of control, from things like the Kabbalah and mysticism and things like that to like the Rockefeller takeover of the medical industry, Technocracy as a whole, and a couple of other things. That went really well. And then I kind of took a step back and I was like, hey, I kind of want to do like my own thing, be able to, work when I want and be live when I want,
Mm-hmm.
make my own schedule and stuff. So um, we have kind of loosely been in talks of me maybe coming back and doing another series on some more topics. But for now, I'm just kind of freelancing it.
Oh, that's awesome. And is that available? I have to admit, I have not seen it on Iconic. Is that just out there, or is it a paid site, or?
They do paywall their content. It
Mm-hmm.
For the first month, you can actually start for like $2, and you get 30 days unlimited access to everything on the site. But I also release like previews and stuff. If you go to my highlights on my X profile,
Mm-hmm.
I release like little previews of each of them
Oh,
and
cool.
things like that. But
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. I just hadn't gotten to actually getting over there and checking, but that's really amazing that you got some content up there. And so with your webs of connectivity, there's something that I noticed about it, or something I've kind of parallel been thinking is
Mhm.
with the webs, like there's the in I guess Hindu mythology, you've you got Indra's web, you
Mhm.
know, which is like the Indra's web of jewels, and the idea is that you know you have this huge web that is kind of the universe, and then where it crosses, there's jewels, and that's like an individual consciousness. And the idea is if you were like when you like tap it, they all glimmer, they all resonate
Okay.
with each other. So to like see one is to see them all. To like touch one as the light hits it, it ripples all through everything. And so um, something that's really given the empire a hard time right now, I think, is the Jeffrey Epstein stuff, you
Mhm.
know, and uh, it seems like we know he's been around since like Iran Contra. I think
Yeah.
this guy's been around for a long time. I mean, Whitney Webb wrote a huge volumes on him, and she has some new stuff coming out as well, and I can think of a couple others. But basically, if one researches it, if one cares to, his like what he was in jail for was only like one little tip of the iceberg. This guy
Mhm.
he's been a fixer for a long time. He's been involved in a lot. And so it seems like maybe one of the reasons that I guess I'll call it the administration, deep state, whatever you want to call it, is, went from like, yeah, we're going to get this guy, which was always a line, of course, we're going to expose this, to now it's like, oh, I think like Trump actually said it was bullshit, right? Or
Yeah.
something like that the other day. This sudden absolute dismissal, Um, it seems like this is the thing that this is where I think maybe there's kind of like hope for humanity. Yeah, I'm pretty black pilled, but hope for humanity. I'm not when I'm optimistic, it's a big deal, and
Yeah.
so to me, it's like people realize that, and I think the empire realizes that if you see him, if you get who this guy is, and I'm not saying he's a big player, I think he's kind of just an errand boy, really,
Mhm.
but if you figure out who he is and you begin to see all the connections, suddenly you know how the whole damn world works and who runs it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the fear that the administration has, is where it's like, okay, we were like, maybe we slipped up. Maybe we shouldn't have talked so much crap, because
Yeah.
now people are like, well, we want to see what's the real deal. People already know so much. And it's sort of like, it's just, I don't know what they're really afraid of. It's strange, but it seems like, and your work reminds me of that. If we connect all the dots to him in the web, then we know everything. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And not saying like I said, not saying he's a big player, but it's just that to know who he is and to know his history and all the connections, now all of a sudden you know how the world works.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, what do you make of the sudden? I think they never were going to like go any further than they have. I'm not even sure why the info ever even got there in the first place. I mean, like, I think maybe there was an error back in the past. The guy got too bold or something. Maybe he was always supposed to be a focal point, but it just seems like I'm surprised that the darkness was that illuminated,
Mhm.
and it all seems to me like a bit of a psyop in the first place. Like maybe he was just like an Edward Snowden,
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, oh, look at this guy. You can see him. Look what he's doing. Just like Edward Snowden supposedly revealed. But most of that was already known.
Yeah.
Edward Snowden just revealed it to the mainstream media. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And so, like Epstein, I'm like, anyway, I'm kind of railing, but like, do you think maybe Epstein's a psyop? That's just something I sometimes wonder about. Just here, like look over here, and
Mhm.
then why was there ever even a notion of flirtation of releasing more data, or like this? Oh, now we're going to go after people. Like people know a lot of this stuff is real, but they only know the last like decade. Where this
Yeah.
guy's been dirty since Iran Contra. You know, it just seems like this sudden massive reversal. Maybe it was always planned, but I don't know. I sometimes wonder if things got a little out of control for the empire,
Yeah.
and now they're trying to shut it down. I see a bit of fear, you know.
Yeah, I think that a lot of it does go back to like that Palm Beach investigation that was done by like the local police and
Yes.
having that basically taken over by the grand jury. I think that was like a moment of panic where you had like honest police trying to do honest investigating and like meeting with all of the victims and things like that. And that wasn't anticipated, I think. I don't think that they anticipated one of the girls going to the police and then that starting a snowball.
Yeah.
And the way that they did the whole grand jury thing, I think was like a moment of panic for them essentially. Where they were like, "Hey, you know, they knew everything that it would be tied to, so they wanted to quash it as much as they could." And the entire reason for the grand jury itself was to hide everybody else that was involved. And I think now, especially, you know, with the moments leading up to like the election and stuff, I think it was a case of, you know, I'm gonna make these campaign promises, and then once I'm in, I just won't fulfill them, kind of like he did
Yeah.
his first term,
Mm-hmm.
and my base will still love me regardless. And I think they may have underestimated how much people want this information to be public.
Yeah, and I think it might be kind of society's like intuition. I mean, ultimately, we are, even though people tend to be a bit domesticated. You know, we're not necessarily in touch with our instincts. It's a good practice to try to be in touch with your instincts. You know, your intuition, etc. These things do exist, and it seems like this is just such a blatant, you know, uh, it's almost like the film was running like in the old movie projector and it got stuck and all of a sudden you see it burn a hole through the film. You
Hmm.
know, it's like, okay, we're just going to stop this, and no, you're not. Boom, we're going to burn a hole through the film and we're going to see it. And it's like, and then you just look at the yeah, there's all the Q stuff, which is all kind of goofy, but you do look at like the hardcore research done by so many. I mean, a person could invest a couple hours into listening to documentaries, and they're going to go, holy crap, you know, like uh, this guy does exist. So I think that in a way, like the webs you're making, I think you're a little ahead of the game because I think people are starting to make those in their own minds now,
Hmm.
you know, and they're going, wait a second, all of a sudden this is like now he's BS, like this didn't happen. Now it's like the Democrats made this up. What? Like this,
Yeah.
you're handing us this line, and I think even handing us this line is is another screw up on top of the first one
Hmm.
because it's reinvigorating people.
Yeah.
They're going, wait a second, I'm going to start researching this, but I'd kind of forgotten about this, but now I'm interested again, you know. And then I'll, you know, it just seems like it's getting worse. So I don't know, you know, I don't know if this is going to be like Trump's Watergate. I certainly don't think so, but I think this might be a moment where um, I think that the MAGA cult might be. I don't think he's going to quite end up being like a Jimmy Jones and being
Hmm.
like everybody's time to drink the Kool-Aid. I think people are kind of like, no, no, no. The MAGA cult is very strong. I've never seen anything like it, you know.
Hmm.
But I think I don't know enough MAGA people to really make this statement. I need to get outside more and talk to people. But it seems like there's some cracks in that foundation. But it doesn't
Hmm.
really make a difference anyway. I mean, he's there for however many more years. It doesn't matter if you like him. But it does seem like there's some cracks in the foundation, and we're still early on in that administration. And how do you think things are going to go? Do you think the mega cult will just be like, well, whatever, you know, we'll get over it? Do you think people will actually forget like goldfish, just go like, oh, I forgot that was 3 seconds ago? Or is it just going to get worse over the next couple of years?
So I kind of see. two or three different scenarios kind of playing out. One would be that Trump chooses to die on the BS hill, and that obviously like permanently tarnishes his credibility. But he's already in his second term anyway. What does he have
Yeah.
to lose? Um, I think that if that is the case, that there may be a lot of push from JD Vance as far as like trying to get a little more disclosure, still a limited disclosure, but I think there was even something about a meeting that was taking place at his residence about the Epstein thing this week
Mm.
between Pam Bondi, Cash Patel, Dan Bongino, and company. And I think that would be a surefire way to endear him to the disillusioned MAGA base that are upset about the Epstein stuff, and give him basically leeway to use the same platform to run in 2028.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that seems pretty likely. I think the second scenario where they do end up doing some sort of limited disclosure through Donald Trump, where it's like they might name a couple names of people that are maybe already dead or in jail or just completely out of the public space or any sort of they're no longer in like the driver's seat of anything. Throwing those people under the bus, maybe, still doubtful. Really, I think it's just going to be like maybe dead people, something like that. And then the third is he completely reverses, releases just some of the information related to like the sex trafficking aspect of it. But even that is sort of a limited disclosure because I don't think they're ever going to touch like his ties to transhumanism or his crypto investments or the massive money laundering or the eugenics programs he was connected to, and things like that, like AI. He was very heavily involved in like a lot of the things that seem to be on the forefront of the Trump campaign, and then also sex trafficking underage people.
Yeah, yeah, and when you mentioned the Palm Beach episode, that was, um, and that's when, oh, who was it? I forget. Was told to back off because the guy was intelligence. Um, oh, I forget. But yeah, that's like where I think
Yeah.
the intelligence he got that. That's like where the people got kind of that the talk like with the Palm
Yeah.
Beach thing. I think he would have gone down, but people kind of intervened and said, nope, leave him alone. He's intelligence, which
Yeah.
will then like
It was
mhm,
Acosta, I think,
Acosta.
and
Yeah,
then Trump appointed Acosta in his first term.
yeah, and you're like, hmm. So you're like, yeah, the people got the talk on that one. Like, nope,
Yeah.
drop it. And then I think some say that it was actually Trump who, those two had a falling out. Who knows if that's true? But supposedly they did. And some rumor that actually it was Trump that like called the like got the cops on him. Basically said you might want to check out what this guy is doing. So talk about a vengeful man. Just something to
Yeah.
think about, people.
Absolutely.
you know.
I think it even came out that that split sort of happened because Jeffrey Epstein recruited Virginia Giuffre, recently deceased, very
Yeah.
outspoken victim.
Yeah, who died, of course, under weird
Hmm.
circumstances. Yeah, um, and kind of like an Anne Hesh kind of a thing. Like what? Like
Yeah.
that doesn't make sense. You're dead, but you sit up in your on your gurney on the way to the ambulance. Like what? And you kind of, if you ever saw that video of the Anne Hesh thing, it's quite well videos and um, what was his name? Chris Knowles is actually going to do an episode on just the Anne Hesh thing, just by the way,
Nice.
because that's gonna which comes out in a couple of days, because that's kind of a mystery too. So yeah, when you get unfortunately involved with such people, um, it wasn't her choice. Your phrase, it wasn't her choice, but
Right.
she did get involved. Bad things tend to happen. I oftentimes wonder, allegedly, I'm just speculating, like, how many girls freaked out on the island, and just ended up getting taken out on a speedboat and tossed over the side. Just,
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I mean? It's like no good comes from bad people, as
Absolutely.
people should figure out. You can never, if you dance to the devil will never change his step ever. you
Absolutely.
know, yeah, even if you didn't want to be there, unfortunately. Um, which makes me wonder, like, so we have this, the Indra's web, the great web, and if we figure out this one piece, Epstein, it just ripples out, and all of a sudden we realize that what most people know about him and think, oh, it's a sex trafficking guy, it's like goes way back. There's so much
Mhm.
more to it, and that's where you learn like how the world kind of works. I forget his name; it's on the tip of my tongue, but he has Martyr Made podcast, and he did like a 5 hour thing on Epstein, and it was like a kind of a just a documentary where it's all just audible. He's talking, and that was really enlightening. And you realize, like, man, this guy, I don't know who he was. I don't know how it was working. I don't think he was a big player. He was like a foot soldier. Go out and you do things. You're the one people are going to see, but you're never going to see us. But man, that guy has got a history. And
Oh yeah.
the thing is, though, what would even the Trump administration release? I mean,
Mhm.
really, what don't we know? There's just nothing is actioned on. That's the thing. You know.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, between his Black Book release and various flight logs and stuff that have come out, firsthand accounts, it seems like the only thing that they are kind of sitting on is like the video evidence. That seems to be like the only thing they have. The public doesn't.
Yeah, and like Wired of all things, talk about journalism. Wired did an amazing bit of this is years ago, I think, but Wired did a thing where they, I don't know if it was public domain or if they managed to get behind the scenes a little bit, but they got cell phone records
Hmm.
and they actually have a map of all the flights and everything like that. It was a
Yep.
Wired episode, and you're like, well, wait a second, like Wired, right? Like
Yeah.
these guys know, you know what I mean? It's kind of like, wow, like Vice broke a hard hitting story. I'm like, really? When?
Yeah.
So you're like Wired, but Wired blew the lid off of it. So it's kind of like saying Wired has all the Wired has the documents, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And but we don't like.
Right.
So anyway, it's just, and that's the thing I've always appreciated, that you don't like fall for the Snowden thing, because it's like, what are we waiting for on the Epstein thing, right? Everything's already known. You just have to action it, And the
Yep.
thing with Snowden, I always thought what he put out, I'm like, I think in general the alternative media, you could say, I mean uh, I think most of what he released was already well known. You
Yeah.
just it's just that basically the mainstream media, the CNN, the Fox, the CBC, NBC, they released it. They got given, here, read this, and they said it, and it was only a small part of, I guess, all that he really released. But it's like, I've always wondered, like, what do you think Snowden was? Well, what was the point of that? Because he released what was already known to
Hmm.
people, I guess, true, who didn't know it. Then all of a sudden it became valid. Now he's a hero, and we know a little bit more than we knew before. If you're a total normie, I guess, right? It was, if you get your whole universe from Fox News, well, there you go. Now you know. But what do you think the point of him is or was? Because I've never bought that for a second.
Yeah. Um, I kind of see it as like this normalization technique. So if the government were to have come out and announced that they were mass spying on everybody, I feel like they would have like lost control of the plot. People would have been very upset. There would have been huge pushback, especially if it was sort of discovered organically.
Mm-hmm.
With Snowden, not only was he working at the NSA, but he was a contractor for like Booz Allen Hamilton at the time and connected to some really weird stuff. And that way they're able to take the story and do sort of like a controlled disclosure, like you were kind of saying, where like he released stuff that was largely already known by people that kept up with it.
Yeah.
Um, but he was working with Glenn Greenwald, and I think that those two together, I'll just be honest with you, I've dug into Glenn Greenwald. He has some pretty weird ties as well. Some of them the same as Snowden and Julian
Mm.
Assange. But I think that they worked together to release like a limited amount because they even discussed like having so much more stuff that never saw the light of day. And they were able to work together to sort of unfold this narrative so that people would support this controlled opposition guy who, was very, very embedded in the DoD and sort of paint him as this good guy so that people could rally behind an outsider. And I think we saw that same thing sort of happen with Julian Assange and Donald Trump to a degree.
Yeah. Yeah. And because one of the things where the Snowden story didn't ever make sense to me was like we all know a lot about something, even if it's of no consequence. Like all of us just happen to know a little bit about or a lot about something that maybe is just odd knowledge we happen to know. And in this case, that kind of connects for me because so I worked in IT forever,
Mhm.
and I've worked around secure, never top secret stuff. That's only weird people do that. It's
Yeah.
very scary to even be around it. And there's so many regulations there. Like, if you're going to move data, it has to be like in an armored whatever. A building has to be certified to have top secret stuff in it, and
Mhm.
all this kind of stuff. And so when you start, so I've worked with people who have worked with it, and I've been around some lesser security things, but the the idea that he would have had access to this and could have downloaded it to like zip, USB drives and snuck it out is the biggest bunch of crap ever.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. It
Yeah.
doesn't work that way. It's just, sorry, it doesn't. And I know security was a little bit different at the time, but you know, uh, and that nobody would have caught on that he was doing something odd. I mean, I don't want to get into all the regulations. I only know some of them, but in general, if you're around that type of data, the life you live is kind of scary. And I just like, if you were going to copy something local to the machine, well, you can't.
Yeah.
And so how would he have the whole thing? I was sitting there going, like, when I first heard about it, I'm like, wait a second, how, what, like,
Yep.
even at places with much less security, you couldn't do that. So I'm
Yeah.
like, it's like maybe you could have gotten some like screenshots with your phone, right? But but
Yeah.
that's it. You didn't download gigabytes of data. No way. It also makes me wonder about, not to hang up on Epstein too long and that story, but this is one that I wondered about is, and I think it's good to have, it's good to be speculative and
Mhm.
imaginative and like follow your intuition, like don't get, crazy and end up, like ineffective, but
Yeah.
it is good to go a little far sometimes and just ponder. And I think there could be some validity to maybe there, when it comes to like Epstein being a psyop. I think that what if, does anyone ever just think about, could it just be the biggest cover story in the world? Like when we say, oh, people are blackmailed and they have to do these things. I'm like, I have a sneaking suspicion from what I know about evil that evil does evil because it likes
Mhm.
doing evil. And that's why it does it. It doesn't do it for money. True, the dark evil has all the money it's ever going to need. It
Yeah.
already does. The people that we're talking about, they don't need money, and they don't do evil stuff because they're blackmailed. That's just like, what? That's
Yeah.
silly. That's silly. No, they don't need to be blackmailed. And I sometimes wonder, actually not sometimes, I'm coming to like I don't want to make it a conclusion, I need to research it more, but I wonder, when it comes to the Epstein like psyop of, oh, they're all blackmailed, they have to do these terrible things. No, 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 that's just a cover. That's like when people say follow the money. I'm like, no, 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 follow the evil.
Yeah.
Money is a cover story. Money is like a phalanx, like we have the Spartans or like the Romans, like with the great big phalanx, like the wall of shields, and they're poking with their swords.
Absolutely.
Evil hides behind money. I think same as evil hides behind alleged blackmail. So I'll
Yeah.
run that by you. Does that, just what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think you make an excellent point because if it comes out that somebody is blackmailed, it almost sort of partially
Yes.
absolves them of accountability,
Mm-hmm.
where it's almost like it paints them as though they had no choice. And it's like
Yeah.
everything that you do in life is a series of your choices, including the things that you chose to do to get blackmailed. And I think that a lot of these people that are allegedly implicated, I think that they wanted to do various things, whether it's like siding with like Israel or being just a terrible politician. I think that they have that desire already, and they use blackmail a lot to as sort of like this unspoken thing to carry out their true beliefs but still seem like they're normal like us, like they have empathy or compassion or any sort of emotion at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it is one that I do ponder. I just one thing I think, if you were, an evil character, it just seems like like how long could the whole like Epstein thing scam even work anyway? At a certain
Mhm.
point, people are going to be like, well, wait a second, I'm evil and I don't want to like be blackmailed. Like I'm not, what? So I guess in a sense, it's like, yeah, I have no doubt maybe there was like pervy stuff going on here and there. I think that he had a great big estate in like New Mexico. There was one in New York. There was the Epstein Island. And so, I guess it could have been like where, okay, if you're, here's where we have our like elite meetings. And as part of our elite meetings, you can do all kinds of like, well, you name it, right? Because you're a weird person. But are those acts themselves somehow blackmail? I'm like, I don't know. I just don't go for it. I just don't.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't think so.
Yeah, I think that they choose to recruit particular people, especially at like a very young age, and they scout for like particular personality types that are more willing to do things like that, and then the
Yeah.
blackmail is sort of like insurance. So the
Yeah.
person would have done all of these things regardless, whether they were caught on tape doing something illicit or not, and then they can hide behind that, or it can be this extra insurance that whoever is running that ring or whatever has. So it's like, if this person ever decides to have a conscience, or some moral hang up about something, well, now we have this in our back pocket. But typically I think that these people are knowingly involved with what they're doing. They are knowingly attached and are fully aware of the implications that their actions have on the public.
Yeah. Yeah. And the pervy stuff is kind of a fringe benefit. And it also kind of shows your fealty, I guess you could say, because you're
Yeah.
willing to have this like record it. And well, you're in with the gang till death anyway. So you're
Yeah.
not worried about it. And also, I mean, I know it's not a very positive thought, but I sometimes also wonder like, well, who would care? I
Yeah.
mean, we do kind of live in a bit of depravity in some
Hmm.
ways. And so, like, you'll look at somebody like Diddy, and in a way, he is, not to me, but to many, he is he is an example of achievement.
Hmm.
I mean, there is a lot of culture that kind of, feels that way, that would say, wow, this guy's great. This isn't that like the life this is what you want. This is what you aspire to, like the ultimate gangster, you
Yeah.
know? But yet, when he gets caught, I guess you could say, somehow legalities catch up with them. Now we all clutch our pearls. Oh, how terrible! And I'm like, I don't know. And so I think to myself, like, well, even if things were released, I'm like, I'm not sure if our society would care anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's probably not very positive, but I just wonder, like, who would care? You
Well,
know?
that's the thing too. Is like I get called like a black pillar, and people say that I'm like spreading doomerism, and how they feel about the information that I share doesn't change it being true. And so it's a conundrum for me, but with people that aren't able to come to terms with reality
Yeah,
because it upsets them.
yeah. And that's the thing, and we'll definitely touch on that. Is I think that one of the things that you're doing that is like really helpful, and that others are doing as well, is I talked to Oli Demigard,
Hmm.
and he's on the show a few times, and I've been lucky enough to kind of chat with him offline and such. And you know, one of the a really great experience I had with him was where I had like an income stream that I thought was like just evil. Basically, I
Hmm.
was like, you know what? I don't feel good about this. I'm like, I'm gonna stop doing it, because I'm like, it's certainly legal, but I'm like, it's just basically was like I didn't feel good about it. I'm like, this is not what I believe in,
Yeah.
and so I dumped it, and I was just it came up with conversation with Oli, and he like actually starts clapping, and he's like really happy. I'm like, what? And he's like, that's what saves the world.
Yep.
Stop doing things are evil.
Yeah.
Don't compromise. you know
Absolutely. And that's one of my biggest things, especially with like there's people involved with like the JQ circles, for example, and
hmm
they like to fall on, it's the Jews, it's the Jews, it's the Jew. I get told that all the time, and I'm like, no, what you're doing is you're now basically exonerating everybody that isn't Jewish, that made
mm,
the choices to be involved with this, drive this agenda, invest in these things. Because at the end of the day, even when it comes to like our politicians and stuff, people are like they're funded by APAC, and they choose to be funded by APAC and work with APAC. So APAC is like half of it. They wouldn't be able to do the things that they do without the consent and obligation from our elected officials themselves.
Exactly. And, that kind of gets back to my, the blackmail is fake.
Hmm.
It's kind of a psyop cover story where I go, well, isn't APAC as well?
Yeah.
Because it's like, they're not forcing anyone to do anything.
Right.
But it's a great cover story. It's like, well, I have to vote to, send more friggin', 2,000 pound bombs to drop on refugee camps. I have to,
Yeah.
because I'm, like it's APAC. And I'm like, no, no, that's a cover story. It's a great big cover story. So that's my little enlightenments of recent weeks. I'm like, all these cover stories, like, I mean, yeah, I get it. And I understand how people, feel that way. And I really can't blame them on many
Hmm.
levels. I'm like, I get it. I mean, we're all human, and you see what you see. And I understand, I do get it. But at the same time, um, yeah, we do have to be careful on that one, just because, like, what if it's half true?
Yeah.
We still have to, keep researching it and get to the truth of the truth. You know,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And it's one of those things where, when it comes to like receiving funding or whatever that looks like I always try to put myself in their shoes, and I feel like I would always make the decision that goes along with my conscience, and their
Mm-hmm.
inability to do that to me speaks volumes. So, you have like Marjorie Taylor Greene that's like speaking out about AI and Israel and all this, but she's voted, to the benefit of Israel. She voted for the big beautiful bill, like all these things that it's like, okay, well, if you really cared about any of this, you would actually be doing your job, reading these bills, calling things out, and calling out stuff that I think that congressmen and representatives, members of our government, are privy to, that they don't disclose and they don't discuss, that would be especially damning for their peers. And like
Mm.
I think when people look at someone like Thomas Massey, who
Yes.
criticizes the government, I think that he criticizes like very surface level things, and at the end of the day, like he's funded by like Club for Growth, which is a super pro-Israeli um, PAC, and people like Jeff Yoss. Jeff Yoss is a huge contributor to like the Kohelet Policy Forum. So while he's not technically funded by APAC, he is still funded by like pro-Israeli and Zionist interests. I brought
Mm-hmm.
that up to him one time, and he got really mad at me and decided to unfollow me, but had no problem with me calling out all of his peers in Congress and all the things they were connected to. The second I bring this up with like Federal Election Commission receipts, he's like, "Oh, that's just noise. Don't pay attention to that." I'm like, "Well, don't you call out your peers for getting funded by pro-Israeli
Mm-hmm.
Zionist interests? What are you doing here?"
Yeah.
And I think we have that like across the board.
Yeah. And I look at, like Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene. I think, well, isn't that in a way they're just kind of like another Snowden?
Yeah.
Because I look at it and go, well, they want to make sure that everybody knows that they're blackmailed.
Yeah.
What a great way to do it. It's like, oh, they're all black. Everybody's got a little babysitter. And I'm like, oh, that's true. But I think the blackmail part is kind of fake. I mean, they might be. Maybe it's an insurance policy, and I understand they need money to stay in power and everything. But I guess I still see the blackmail as kind of fake, and I still see the money, the APAC thing, as kind of fake. Where I'm like, wait a second, I'm not even sure who's in charge of what. I think to myself, well, and this is when I'd ask, you, is like, who really runs the show, as
Hmm.
far as because, we'll touch on like the Gaza thing, which I guess, of course, I'm not going to go all the way back to like, the Balfour document and all this kind of stuff like that, but just, you know, um, who runs who? I mean, a lot of people. This is the cover story that I see happening so much, is where they'll say, "Well, Israel has APAC, and we have this, and we're blackmailed, and we have to do it because we got to do it, and like, well, Trump got all this money from Adelstein and all this stuff, like, so like they have to, And I'm like, it sounds like a bunch of crap to me. I think it's a
Yeah.
great cover story. Oh, we have to, and I just think, well, who really runs who? Do we run them, or do they run us, or is there even a division?
Yeah.
You know?
I would say at this point, just from everything that I've researched, that you have like private tech companies, you have defense contractors. To me, are just the DoD at this point. It
Mm-hmm.
seems like at least somewhere along the way they've worked with departments of defense, or they were funded by them, or they have joint projects together, or something like that. And that the DoD works with basically like every military on the planet, including Israel's, and I think that it's a combination of like very very I guess like grandfathered in like religious extremists that adhere their beliefs a lot to like the Kabbalistic system. I think it is bankers out of both like European bankers, Swiss bankers especially, and the United States, and then you have like the military essentially. So it's like the money sort of smooths everything over, make sure everyone's getting paid to do what they're supposed to do. I think the Kabbalistic portion of it is like the ultimate end goal, and how they
Mm-hmm.
sort of get people to, I guess, adhere to this belief system and this agenda on a spiritual level. And then the military is there as like the physical force to basically enforce the policies and things like that. And that divvies out to think tanks, NGOs, private contractors, VC capital firms, and so you get the like this hierarchy of what I sort of see as like the three main pillars of religion, the military, and banking that
Mm.
funnel out into other things that affect all facets of life.
Wow, that's actually a great like acronym, like RMB.
Yeah.
Religion, military, banking, and that does make sense. Yeah, you know, and I often just see it as we use that word like neocon, and I'm always like,
Hmm.
well, okay, so neo-colonial, I think you mean, and then I'm like, well, what's really new about colonialism? This just
Yeah.
seems like the same old crap, and I see that as an aspect of it too. Like we, one of the things that got me with the I don't have I'm like a political atheist, right? I'm like, I
Hmm.
don't have any party, I don't, that's all, I don't do that.
Yeah.
So, but the thing is that when I do see like there was like the Biden potato cult, now there's like the MAGA cult,
Yeah.
but to me that did it speak to you at all when no he said, like Trump said, I'll end the war in Gaza, well, the genocide in Gaza, oh, and I'll end the war in Ukraine, and everybody keeps saying he said he was going to do that, and now he's not doing it. And I'm like, I know, I'm almost like, didn't you guys like, who could possibly have fell for that?
Yeah.
How did I'm stuck because to me, I never even heard him say it because it was untruth, and I can't hear untruth that blatantly,
Right.
and I'm like, people people believe that.
Yeah. Well,
It,
even if he's like hinted towards the notion of it, it's one of those things where I do think that they believe in like the karmic exchange, where they have to kind of tell you what's going on, but in a roundabout
mm-hmm.
way. And if he's ever made any allusions to like ending the genocide, it's because there's nobody left to genocide.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. Because a moment for me that was a big one that like, because I mean, I can have a bit of, I can be delusional as well. I can fall for nonsense, I can. And so I had this little bit of belief. I was like, okay, well, let's see, a little belief, and
Hmm.
but then one of the first things he did in office was sit with like BB and say, it's not genocide, it's real estate. And
Yeah.
I was like, okay, yeah, all delusion gone. I had a little bit, now I know better. I slapped myself a few times and I was like, okay, I won't be fooled again. What was I thinking? I had this little bit of belief and I'm like, oh God. But that had to be a point he made one of the first days in office, I think. He was even in office a week and he has to make that statement.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the hell, bro?
Yeah. Absolutely.
you know, yeah, it was that important. Wow.
Yeah,
Mm.
and even now it's like they triple down, quadruple down, and clearly, I know that he's probably using something similar to like the Cambridge Analytica thing that he used for his first term, where they're analyzing the discussions that are happening on social media. They're scraping that
Oh
data.
yeah.
They have
Woo.
marketing, PR guys, everything like that, that are, basically telling him like, hey, your base is not really sitting well with like the Israel stuff and the Epstein stuff, and they're just moving forward anyway. And I think it's because they have this mentality of, Trump has appointed a majority to the DOJ and like the Supreme Court. He owns the guy that's in charge of the SEC. He's basically got like all branches of government kind of locked down, and it's like, what can you do, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you get into, I'm not a like, constitutional scholar on it, of course, but like the whole like tariff thing, where
Mm-hmm.
it's like in general, I think it used to be Congress, but then there was some legislation years ago where they like allowed the president to have some, more sway on that one.
Mm-hmm.
But it's sort of like the spirit of the law, and I think the letter as well, was never that it would be used for foreign policy.
Mm-hmm.
Never like, oh, if you like, so like they're going after India, going and saying, hey, look, 100% tariff now if you, buy oil from Russia. And you're like, I kind of get this feeling when I hear things like that, and the whole like alligator Alcatraz, I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
what? Like I get this feeling that I ask you. I think that there's a changing of, and it's a bit esoteric, right? But like the changing of ages. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
that book everybody's heard of, like what do they call it? The Fourth Turning,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, I'm honestly I've never been a fan of the book really. I kind of think the guys who wrote it are kind of jokers and they're a little bit too biased, but still there are cycles,
Yeah.
and I think they made a point that there are cycles, and I think there's also kind of ages, and
Mm-hmm.
there's generations, and at a certain point, like I feel I can grasp how during the 60s and 70s, like during the Vietnam War, how like the hippies, you could say, like the young people who were like, wait a second, I'm not sure I like this. We're talking to like their, World War II era parents, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just like this incredible divide. And it was really it wasn't just generation or age, it was ages. The world had changed,
Yeah.
you know? And I think it's changed once again. And I think that it's an odd way of looking at it, but I think Trump represents like symbolically, I think what's happening is it's the end of the greatest generation.
Mm-hmm.
It's the end of the boomers. It's the end of that way of thinking. Like there's a
Mm-hmm.
great book, America's Hidden, or it's called like the Hidden Regime Change. I forget what it's called, but it's about like from like 1945 to 1991
Mm-hmm.
during the Cold War. Um, like America did like 60 or 70 regime change, most
Yeah.
regime changes around the world, and they've only done I think more since. And the thing is, you go, what right did we have? Like, oh my gosh, like no wonder BRICS is ensuring there's a multipolar world. We're a pain in the ass,
Yeah.
and we're not even nice about it. We're like straight up colonialists. Like, hey, this it's our way or we'll bomb you.
Yeah.
Um, maybe we'll just bomb you anyway. Why not?
Right.
And I think we're seeing a change of ages. I really look at the Congress. I look at like Trump. You look at a lot of the people, and I go, you know what? When you old farts aren't here anymore, when your generations are gone and they're declining, like what's gonna exist? So I
Mm-hmm.
really feel that what's allowing, let's say, like the genocide in Gaza, like
Mm-hmm.
the war between America and Russia, Ukraine's got
Mm-hmm.
nothing to do with it. Um, these are and like these alligator Alcatraz, all these
Yeah.
weird buzzwords, like all this stuff. I'm like, every time I hear him speak, more and more, I think, or the administration speak, all of them, I think, you're talking to my dad who's 97.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking to boomers. You're talking to like people that, I don't know what it is, but it's almost like I think the empire, what they wanted and like prosperity for the people existed during the boomer era, but the
Mm-hmm.
empire doesn't care. And it's almost like things went right for the boomer era, and there's like this weird allegiance, like, well, we're just not going to think about like the regime changes. We're not going to think about like, Vietnam, where like even McNamara said, sorry, we thought that there was, we are sorry about killing all the people.
Yeah.
We got it wrong. Sorry about that. Like there's this, I feel that I don't think what we're doing can hold on another generation. I really don't. I just ask what you think of that. Like, it seems like the greatest generation, which there's like 9 still alive, and like the boomers as they're getting older, I just don't think people that are under 50 really are really going for like America's mission right now.
Mhm. Yeah, I absolutely agree, and you know it's not like an uncommon thing for the youth to like heavily identify with the counterculture,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that the counterculture right now is sort of just don't trust government. That
Mm-hmm.
seems to be like the biggest sentiment, or don't trust authority inherently, and it it's great that we do have that, but that also like leaves the doors open for people to be, you know, misled in various directions, like seeing Trump as an outsider, for example, where he does still sort of capture like some of the youth base, and
Mm-hmm.
I think those are the people that still see, you know, the possibility for there to be ever an outsider in office, and I am under the belief, just like from everything that I've studied, is that anybody that's like organically an outsider never even has their name on the ballot. It seems more often than not, and it's interesting because like you say with like the end of this age, it sort of seems like, you know, you have the Trump administration constantly touting this thing, the golden age or the age of abundance and things like that, and I think that it sort of speaks to what they foresee as like the world to come. There's a lot of things that are being enacted right now that were like main talking points for the original like technocracy movement, back in the 20th century. There's a man named Thorstein Veblen, and he specifically talks about the voluntary abdication of all absentee owners of like big business, and government, and they talk about the replacement by reform-minded technicians and workers. So that's what we saw with like Doge, and we see with Palantir, and a lot of like the Peter Thiel acolytes and associates that are getting added to the administration. Uh,
Yeah.
they talk about specifically the creation of a national directorate to supervise the reallocation of all goods and services. That again kind of looks a little bit like
Mm.
Doge. And then the elimination of the artificial price system based on the equally artificial monetary system, which Trump talks about. You know,
Oh
there's
yeah.
murmurs about like the Federal Reserve ending, and they want to use crypto to fix the economy. Um, and his entire point was to sort of summarize that if the technicians and the workers were so inclined that once they permeated all of these facets like big business, government, you know, things like that, that they would be able to sort of hold the United States hostage, because now they're working off technology that the representatives don't understand, that you know, people in everyday life aren't able to sort of overcome or circumnavigate, and it really just sort of seems like a little bit of a coup almost. Um,
Mm.
and the ultimate goal was to establish a Soviet of technicians, which would be, you know, governments married to basically all of the main corporations, kind of like they are right now through like DoD contracts, State Department contracts, things like Operation Stargate, where these big tech companies are getting billions and billions of dollars to build out government infrastructure, so that when, you know, if somebody else wants to come in and try to take over, now the entire system is basically catered towards these people being in control.
Mm. Yeah. And that like makes me think about like Peter Thiel, who was somebody who kind
Yes.
of like definitely opened the door for you. You went, something's funny going on here. Let me explore this because, like, we should have our human intuition. I think people should, and I think like our intuition is almost like the greatest, enemy of empire that exists. I think
Hmm.
because when people aren't easily fooled, like when there was the jab going on,
Hmm.
I didn't need all the research and the bullshit to know it wasn't a good idea.
Yeah.
I instantly was like, no, and then also like walked by one of the many free vaccine centers.
Hmm.
It was in a It was in a Walmart of all things. So I go to Walmart once in a while. I admit it. So I was going in there, and there's a free vaccine area, and you could feel this. You could feel this evil
Yeah.
resonating from it, and I'm just like, I don't need. Our intuition is very, very good. You
Yeah.
know, if we just listen to it and cultivate it. That was poison. I could feel it. I was like, oh my God, it's a great big demon. You know, and so Peter Thiel, when I saw him giving a talk wherever it was, you might probably know exactly where and when, but when he was talking about the what he's doing with he said our enemies should like go to sleep worried or afraid
Mm-hmm.
or something like that, and I forget all the context of that. But I was like, I get it when, let's say like, okay, the boomers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would be like, yeah, they should. I made a killing investing in Palantir. And I'm like, cool, bro.
Yeah.
We're probably not going to talk much after I just heard that, but cool, you know?
Absolutely.
But I just like the resonant evil from that man. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
who in the world doesn't get what he's saying and doing? I was like, case closed. It was
Yeah.
like the first thing I ever heard about him was I just saw that one little snippet. Oh yeah, and he was talking about like what lavender and
Project Lavender.
yeah, I think it was
Yeah.
that. I forget all the details, but I'm like even Who's Your Daddy and lavender and all this crap,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, dude, human beings don't do shit like that.
Yeah.
You
Absolutely.
know?
And like the ambrosia thing where
Yes.
he was tied up with this company that was trying to harvest young blood to transfuse into older people, and I'm like, that just seems like the adrenochrome thing with extra steps.
Yeah, I know. And like, do you terrify and beat the children while you're harvesting
Right.
the blood? You know what I mean? Because that's the rich stuff that they like. You know what I mean? So it's just, and you're like, dude, how can who's falling for this guy? It's very
Yeah.
strange. I'm not sure if anybody is, but they are frightening in that way. Somebody who can be like, oh yeah, even though we're genocidal monsters, the people that we're killing should be really afraid because
Yeah.
we know when their whole family is home before we blow up their house. It's like, cool, yeah, that's nice. But he's definitely an enlightening figure. So what are some of the things that maybe he's involved in that people don't really know, because most people don't know who he is? Like, how would you describe him, like his reach, you
Yeah.
know?
So to me, it seems like Peter Thiel, he had his father that was in Germany, and he was basically connected loosely through the United States government by like helping to facilitate deals like the Rio Tinto. And there was another mine that he was a part of, and that was kind of where like some of the early money came from. He comes over here from South Africa during that apartheid thing, where people like David Sachs and Elon Musk were also at. Um, and he comes over here, and he seems to be really, really intrigued by the teachings of people like Hegel and Kant, and very, very inspired by some of the sentiments from like the French Revolution. And I think that what sort of happened over time was he was recognized for his ability to basically take the agenda and translate it into what sounds like really profound philosophy.
Mm,
And I think that he uses that to sort of indoctrinate people in a roundabout way. Not only Christians, but like libertarians, both of them who should have a problem with this guy because of his, transhumanist beliefs are basically a slap in the face to anything that I've ever seen as far as Christianity goes.
yeah.
Um, and then with the libertarians, they think that he's just some really cool guy that funds a lot of things and hates the government, but he also runs basically the largest spying operation on United States soil.
Yeah.
Um, and I think he was recognized very early on while he was at Stanford because of that seed money that he ended up getting from InQtel to help start Palantir. His work with PayPal was sort of a nudge in the direction of digital currency. I think that they saw that he got some early seed funding from that, and then once he linked with the CIA, that basically gave him the access he needed to become one of the most powerful people in the tech industry, because it's not like Palantir is this incredibly amazing, one of a kind AI or anything. It's just they get all of their power from the data that they're able to access. So their government contracts with not only our government, but defense departments around the world, various like private corporations and stuff. And I think that over time they've just slowly amassed enough data and contracts and stuff to turn into a very prominent figure. I mean, his journey into tech mirrors that a lot of like Larry Ellison, for example.
Mm.
Larry Ellison, seed funded by Oracle, CIA, or by the CIA through In-Q-Tel when he started Oracle. He buys Sun Microsystems, and then now Oracle software and VMware is all over the world and runs a lot of like websites and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they've sort of flooded the marketplace so much that detaching them from any sort of entity, they basically made themselves priceless, I would say, to like the regime and the agenda, because of how embedded they've become. Because he's obviously like venture capital. He has his thumb on the pulse of Stanford. He has his Teal Fellowship where he's able to sort of capture bright-minded academics who are looking to go to college. He'll just throw money at them to help their project. The creator of Ethereum, for example, like created Ethereum with Peter Thiel seed money. The mass surveillance stuff, so like collecting data from basically everywhere that Palantir can be installed. And he even has like offshoot ventures like seasteading, where he's trying to create these fortresses basically that exist just far enough off the coast of countries so that immigrants can live there. And it's going to be essentially like its own 15-minute city style, but they'll be able to be ferried to and from countries and bypass like immigration laws, for example.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that one at all. Whoa.
Yeah.
Gosh.
He's got his name in a few of those, and then he's also like very heavily involved in like the biotechnical stuff, obviously like a huge military contractor as well. And his VC, I mean, he's got so many VCs, we'd probably spend the rest of the episode if I sat here and just named those.
Yeah, yeah, and that's one of the things definitely that people could, if they were interested in that, definitely your lives that you do. You
Yeah.
get you dig deep in this audience participation. It's a community thing, and you follow the rabbit hole. Well, you never get to the bottom of it, but you just go a long ways and keep after it. And also when it comes to characters like that, I mean, I sometimes wonder, like, well, no one can do as much as he's doing. And no one can do as much as supposedly like an Elon Musk is doing or whatever. Right. And I always think like, the head of Facebook, the creepy dude, Zuckerberg, yeah. Like, I think to myself, they really are just letterheads. They really are just like they're created to atone with a certain demographic. Like you look at like a Musk, he's totally like bro culture. He talks like this, inefficiencies. Well, totally speaks to like the young bro culture, And so these, I think to myself, like, on a daily basis, like, what do any of them do? Like, you're telling me like they run all that crap every day? What, they have like 4 meetings? I mean, no way. Like, I sometimes wonder if they're just kind of like these. They're kind of like another version of like an Epstein or something. It's like, here you go, here's your money, you're famous, just sit there and take the fall when we need you to, or something like that. Because
and when we look at figures like Elon and Peter Thiel, it's like if Peter Thiel would have come out being a little more charismatic, he would probably be Elon Musk right now. And so these people are, honestly, I think they're a little stupid. And like useful idiots to like the DoD, for example. Like DARPA is absolutely running the show for like Elon, Peter Thiel, in coordination with the CIA, FBI, NSA, and every other department. But yeah, these people are absolutely interchangeable, and they serve also as sort of like a lightning rod for public attention.
Yes.
I'm super glad that now it seems like way more people know about Peter Thiel now than they did last year when I first started talking about him and stuff. But now nobody's talking about like Eric Schmidt, you know, who
Mm.
is just as involved as Peter Thiel, was involved way earlier, and is just as prevalent with like VC capital. He was very influential at Google. He's part of like government programs. He's been appointed to committees by like presidents and things like that. And so I sort of see it as like this two factor thing where they can take the heat and the attention, and then we'll keep working over here in silence on the agenda while you guys get the shitstorm, basically.
Yeah, they're kind of like letterhead for specific projects, you
Yeah.
know, I think. Yeah. And uh, and since you mentioned crypto and all of that, or little ways ago, we now have the Genius Act,
Yeah.
you know, and I don't totally understand it, you know, but from what I think I understand, having researched it some, it seems like, so we've got and you know, I have my own reservations about crypto, you know, same as you do, you know. I mean, if we look at it, you know, objectively, there's definitely reasons to you know,
Mm-hmm.
but so we have a fiat, you know, currency. We have like a debt-based currency, and people aren't. And let me know if this sounds right, because I'm not sure if you've researched it or not. But when I look at the Genius Act, I think what's kind of happening is, so we have our fiat currency. It's debt-based. We sell our debt to other nations usually, like Japan owns most of it. I think the greatest majority. The Fed owns a good deal. China used to buy it,
Yep.
but now one of the issues is, so when you have a $20 bill, you have $20 of debt, you know, which is weird,
Yeah.
right? But so debt-based currency based on countries buying our debt usually, but now, especially with the rise of BRICS and a changing world, I think for the better, honestly, multipolar world, I think it's a better thing. Um, but regardless, people are hesitant to buy our debt. You're not going to buy the debt of a country you're going to go to war with,
Mm-hmm.
especially when that country is saying that, oh well, first Russia, China, just hold on, you're next, okay, just sit tight, okay, we're coming.
Yeah.
You know, they're, you know, which is totally Boomerville in my opinion.
Yeah.
That's who I think, that's the administration, like Alligator Island, China, you're next, all this crap. You know, like
Yep.
who are you talking to? You know,
Yeah.
like who buys this crap? Who gets off on this? Oh, I know. Anyway, but so what the Genius Act, I think, is doing is, so now we have stable coins, which are
Mm-hmm.
basically like your, you know, USD Circle, like USD or USDT Tether, you know, the many stable coins, which really ultimately are not backed one to one with dollars anyway. We already
Mm-hmm.
kind of know that. So they're already in a way a fiat of themselves.
Yes.
And so with that, since the nations that we're at war with, you know, are like, hey, you know, they're like, we're not going to buy your debt. No, you know what I mean? Like, that's silly. We're not going to do that. And so they even don't have to like necessarily stop buying it. They just let it expire, basically.
Yeah.
You know, and that's bad enough. So what I think I see happening is you print stable coins to buy the debt, to buy the bonds,
Mm-hmm.
and then we use the stable coins.
Yeah.
And that also helps to prop the dollar a little bit. But I'm like, wait a second. So we have seen the fall of fiat currencies in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're saying we're going to make a even more fiat currency to buy the bonds to make a, like, we are headed for, I mean, if I like, this is beyond comprehension. That's why I think
Yeah.
like this is the changing of an age, because this is going to go out really bad. I think I'm accurate on that, but
Yeah.
I'm not totally sure. I need to research more. But I mean, if we're buying our bonds with stable coins to prop up a dollar, then of course to have an even like a fiat based on fiat.
Yep. That's what I always say is crypto is the fiat of fiat.
Yeah, you're like,
Yeah.
how's this going to end? I mean, we're going to make the Weimar Republic look like tame.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. See,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
So, like looking at all of the like the stable coins in general, anyway,
Hmm.
they all have a fee associated with them to even transact with them, which is like a pitfall that we don't even have with fiat currency. And when I start talking negatively about crypto and how the in the Fed movement isn't what people think they automatically assume that I'm like pro Federal Reserve, and I'm
Hmm.
like, actually, the very reasons that I am against the Federal Reserve are the reasons I'm against crypto. And when you start to dig into like the specific like moneyed interests that are behind a lot of these stable coins that are even like specifically mentioned in the Genius Bill, they don't name the names of the stable coins, but they kind of outline requirements that are going to be needed for cryptocurrencies that most of these stable coins sort of meet already. So you have like Ripple, who is, it's run by it was started by Brad Garlinghouse and Chris Larson. Brad
Mm.
Garlinghouse, he's been tied to like Ancestry, which is owned by
Mm.
BlackRock. He was part of AOL. He's part of Silver Lake Partners, which invests in Oracle. He's part of Yahoo. And then Chris Larson, he was the guy that created e-loans on the internet and like online FICO credit scores. He's on the board of
Mm.
Credit Karma. He's loosely tied to like George Soros and the Open Society Foundation. And then you have Tron founder Justin Sun, he was accused of fraud until Trump took over the SEC, and then those charges magically went away. Um, and so many other things. I think he just went on Jeff Bezos's Blue Origin psyop, like space capsule.
Oh
Um,
wow.
yeah, you have Solana, which is what like the Trump and Melania meme coins were launched off of. That's just funded by like people from General Capitalist Part or Catalyst Partners. One of the guys that started it went to the Wharton School, which is where Trump went, where Buffett went, where the CEO of Alphabet went, and Anatoly Yakovenko. He was part of Dropbox and Qualcomm, and then you start talking about something like Tether, and Tether
Hmm.
is it's attached to some very very dark people. Brock Pierce was one of the co-founders. He was associated with Epstein. He
Mm.
ran this thing called Digital Entertainment Network, where he was accused of child sexual assault by some of the people that were working there. They were basically like working with teen personalities to try to do like the
Mm.
first online entertainment media company. He's tied to like the Medici Bank family. He's tied to the Bitcoin Foundation. You have Howard Lutnick is also attached to
Oh.
Tether. And that's where we get our Secretary of Commerce. You get Epstein's neighbor, Cantor Fitzgerald. He helped Rumble with their like IPO thing. He's Chabad Lubavitch. He just missed 9/11, which I always think
Mm.
is, that nobody. There's so many people that coincidentally missed it that are so influential now that I'm like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Um, and then you have like MGX, which is like partnering with Trump's World Liberty Financial, which is a crypto exchange that's run by his two sons and Stephen Witkoff's son.
Mm.
They're in partnership with like the UAE government, and they have projects with like SoftBank, Oracle, and stuff. And it essentially becomes like the Goldman Sachs, the Wells Fargos of the world. Now they can become their own individual Federal Reserve to a degree. They set the terms, the interest rates, everything like that. And at the end of the day, they create this financial system that's running on, state-owned lines. Everything's privy. Like nobody has any privacy anymore.
Hmm.
They talk about encryption and stuff, and even the history of encryption just ended up being like this massive psyop over the 20th century where they were like selling fake cryptography machines to foreign countries while
Mm.
United States intelligence, British intelligence, and German intelligence were all working with the Swiss on these cryptography machines and selling them to people that were their enemies, secretly having the keys to be able to decode
Oh.
everything. And that That program eventually became owned by the NSA, who created the SHA-256 encryption of Bitcoin.
Mm.
And so I think the entire cryptography thing is a huge scam, and the whole outsider thing with Satoshi Nakamoto is another one of those like like Snowden type things where it was this outsider that leaked this stuff government didn't want you to know to get you to buy into it, and it just pushes the agenda along.
Yeah, it does. And when it comes to the like the regulation, like a lot of our crypto friends will be like, yeah, it's great, because we're going to be legit because like BlackRock's buying Bitcoin to
Yeah,
have an ETF, and I'm like, what?
yeah,
You're jazzed, right? Okay. And then also it comes down to like transactions. We all know about the idea of the social credit score and such like that, and but I think many people, if not most, or they're not aware of the AML, as we call it, the anti-money laundering that exists today.
hmm,
And so when you look at the government regulation, or the government makes things up, and then it says banks, you have to do this.
yeah,
Then the banks go, okay, they don't have any
yeah,
choice. You know what I mean? It's like saying no to Stalin, right? You don't have the choice.
yeah,
Um, and so every single some are happening live, and then some are in batch processes that happen every a few days or whatever, but like every single transaction that exists is analyzed beyond belief,
hmm,
you know either live or in a batch process. And the banks get the government, like the Canadian government, the US government, will say these are the requirements, and then they'll oftentimes come up with new requirements that are
yep,
even more deep. And so um, I've always wondered, like, there's no possible way, because no, that's the thing where, of course, they sell us this, like, Patriot Act bullshit,
yep,
about, oh yeah, this is, for whatever freedom, God knows what, right? It's like
yeah,
it, and so a huge aspect of what is, how do I put it? It's, of course, as we know, it's never been about, like, stopping bad people from doing money laundering. I mean, like, the
right,
really bad people who do money laundering do it legally,
yeah,
so I mean, it's like, um but the thing is that, well, legally, in a way, right? But the thing is, whether it's Tether, or whether it's Solana, or whether it's, like, Monero, it doesn't matter what it is. Like, if it's a currency and we were going to use it in any formal way, as in, like, we make it a legitimate currency, I guess, as by introducing it, now banks hold it, you can save your crypto there, but transactions have to go through AML. Like, as long as, like, okay, fine, you could, at one time, you could have Bitcoin. I guess even now you could, like, make an anonymous wallet, although that blockchain just gets hammered constantly, and they're looking, so they may not be able to. Most likely, when you make a new wallet address, they know you did it,
yeah,
because basically there's so many hooks. There's
yep,
so many. Well, where the IP come from that made it? You can make them offline, but then basically, as soon as you buy, as soon as you use it, send, receive,
hmm,
your the AI that's involved in that blockchain is thoroughly known. And even if there's something
yeah,
that they don't know, they'll connect it as soon as something moves.
absolutely,
So you know, it just gets me where, whether it's a dollar or a penny, and you're making a transaction which is going through massive AML,
yeah,
you know, and then the banks are required by law to flag it. If based on the requirements that the government gives them, they're
hmm,
going to say, oh, this got flagged. We have to look into it. If something's funny, they might send it off to the upstream. You
hmm,
know, so there's no way on this planet, while this government exists, that you're going to use a stable coin and that is not going to go through AML.
right,
It's impossible. that
yeah,
that that is one of the power structures they use to keep society under control. you know
absolutely. And too, like the catch with it is, right now with physical currency,
hmm
you can privately exchange that. Like if I wanted to hand you a $20 bill, I
yeah.
could do that. You will get the full $20. There won't be like an intermediary fee or anything, and nobody knows about it.
Mm-hmm.
if I just physically hand it to you in person. Where with crypto, even if you want to send your friend $20, you now have to pay a fee for the transaction, and it's also logged and categorized. So there, it basically ends like the public's ability to transact privately.
Yeah.
Um, Meanwhile, they can, run various different games and have infinite wallets and run their money through like various like laundering things. Do you ever remember like Tornado Cash?
Oh, no, don't know that one.
It was a pretty good laundering system where people that would launch a meme coin and it would end up being a rug pull, but instead of just
Mm.
cashing out directly, they'd send it to this Tornado Cash service, which would divvy it up into a bunch of different wallets that would then send it to other wallets that would then ultimately all funnel it back to the same person for a small
Oh,
fee.
wow.
And I would they ended up the government ended up shutting that down, but to assume that they don't have something like that within the private banking industry and with all of these people that work at these banks and VC capital firms, to think that they don't have some sort of side system for that. I mean, look at like the Panama Papers or the Pandora
Mm-hmm.
Papers and everything that exposed with the AML stuff involved. Now you bring in this extra layer where they have the systems and capabilities to figure out who's doing what. For the regular person like us, I can see what Larry Fink is investing into with fiat. When it
Yeah.
starts getting into crypto, now the average person is expected to be able to read blockchain and associate that all the way through the different transactions and follow the money that way. And I think it just muddies the waters for people like us while
Yeah.
making their actions and activities and stuff way more hidden.
Yeah. And I think the FTX, scandal, I guess the FTX, that exchange. Now, I don't know all the details on that, but from what I understand, that was, being used for money laundering. At least that was the
Mm-hmm.
accusation.
Yeah.
And if that was true, it kind of shows that what we're dealing with, like in Congress, because like that you use the blockchain, man, like
Mm-hmm.
that's tied to you now,
Yeah.
so I think there was this like thing of, okay, send us the money over here, and it's like to Ukraine for whatever that's going to be, what they were using, like the FTX like exchange for some aspect of that would
Yeah.
have sent some back to you, but it's Bitcoin, nobody will know. And it's
Yeah.
like, oh man, as you were saying, like a lot of these people are dumb.
Yeah.
It's like, you should have had him like sending you a suitcase full of $100 bills, because you're so busted. If that ever
Yeah.
was actioned on, you hammered yourself on that one.
Absolutely. And two, people talk about, well, the government can't just come seize my Bitcoin or whatever that looks like. And it's like that's insane to think that you can believe that, because look at what happened with like the Canadian trucker protest, where
Yes.
all of their crypto wallets, they didn't have to like hack them, or they just had to turn off the on off ramps, and the money becomes worthless.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think of those scenarios where like somebody is maybe a little too dissident, for example, they could
Mm-hmm.
just very easily shut off your internet and your power, and now you have no wealth, you have no ability to transact with the outside world. So like the digital only currency thing being a form of freedom is just asinine when you start to apply the logic of what the government has done over time.
Yeah. 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 And if so, I wonder, well, what do you think that looks like with the that could be somewhat, like localize it, just like while we have a couple more years. I just look at it as cycles, you know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
I know, just to say, like the Trump cycle,
Hmm.
we have that many more years in with him around, and like who knows if it's kind of a tough one. But where do you see, crypto and stable coins and such, going during like the years of this current, administration? Do you think it's going to be like, adoption, or is it just going to be a lot of, I'm not really sure how. I know this family's making money off of it,
Hmm.
right? But that's just kind of what they do. They're grifters, right? Just
Yeah.
billion-dollar grifters.
Yeah.
But do you think their buy-in is really heavy? I just don't know exactly. I just call it the empire. I'm not really sure. Are we going to be like when I see the Genius Act, you think, are we really going to be buying our debt with stable coins and using stable coins, and then people thinking that they're free? Like, I don't know, what do you think our next couple of years looks like with
Yeah.
crypto?
So I think there's a bigger thing at play here, where you kind of have to zoom out from just crypto itself and kind
Yes.
of see like how it would play a part in like a larger role. And I think that right now, with especially the talks about like a digital identity, I think that is going to create essentially like a tokenization of us,
Mm-hmm.
within federal systems and honestly worldwide systems, where now when we go to like open a crypto wallet, they will associate that with the tokenization of our legal identity, and that way they're able to just communicate via like APIs essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the proof of work side of Bitcoin, especially, and a lot of these cryptos, I think was the argument to sort of tie it to energy.
Mm.
Um, we saw like Bitcoin mining rigs and stuff all getting shut down. Meanwhile, you have giant tech companies that are building data centers specifically just for mining crypto.
Yeah.
and and I think that with like the climate change push that's going on, that one of the goals of the original technocracy movement, funny enough, Elon's grandfather was a part of that.
Mm-hmm.
But they wanted to move us from a like a monetary based society to an energy based one, where our currency would be energy based. And then you start speaking about carbon taxes and carbon
Mm.
credits, and like the biomedical, like biotech medical turn that we're sort of having, where you'll have wearables and eventually implantables and stuff. And I sort of see that as a way to, I think the end goal, and this is probably a little further out than the Trump era for this, but to tie carbon production to money. And that way, like
Mm.
anytime we produce carbon, whether that's having a child or breathing or polluting, all these things that they claim cause carbon and cause global warming, we're going to be nickel and dimed for all of that.
Mm. Gotcha. And I can see that too. That's like, that's definitely zooming out and seeing the big picture. And a the digital dollar, or like, strictly digital currency, it's almost like stable coins really, I just see it as an upgrade to the controllability of of money,
Yeah,
basically. So it's like, a stable coin isn't really any different than the dollar. I mean,
right.
it's just a better version for the empire to manage the herd with.
Absolutely.
Like you're not going to have a social credit score as easily with the dollar as you would tether.
Right.
It's just it's like dollar 2.0 is what it really is. Yeah, the final
Absolutely.
battle.
Yeah.
Dollar 2.0, the final battle.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it really is, the showdown. Um, and so I was going to ask you, because you, I think, probably have your finger a little bit better on the pulse, like with the live streams that you're doing and such. I do think, and then I'm going to ask you about. We'll definitely look at, what is it, collective functional stupidity that you talked about recently.
Hmm.
Collective functional stupidity, because that, I think, is really going to be helpful for people, because I think it's true, it exists, it's
Hmm.
happening. But before that, like, my notes were basically, and I forget where I kind of sourced this, so sorry I can't reference it, I didn't say this, but do you wonder if, like, right now we're looking at like the Abrahamic religions, kind of like these like three major death cults, that like basically are like end times death cults that are trying to
Yeah.
like finally get their horrible lives over so they can, I guess, go to heaven and be happy, whatever,
Yeah.
but they forget you take yourself with you, right? So how's it going to be a great place? It's just, whatever, anyway, but Abrahamic religions on the way out, I have a feeling that this the Gaza genocide is turning especially younger people off to the Abrahamic religions, at least here in the West,
Hmm.
because as we look at God, this is someone else said this actually. Sorry, I can't reference it, but As we look at Gaza, we're looking at narcissists' pool, and we see ourselves in the reflection.
Hmm.
You know, it's basically like, Jung saying like the collective shadow. So that like genocide is the collective shadow of the West. You
Right.
know, and as we look at that and go, if you're alive with a soul, if your intuition is intact, you see yourself, you realize that I'm responsible in some ways.
Yeah.
This is, I can't just be, I'm picking on boomers today, but I can't just be a boomer and be like, I made a lot of money on Palantir. No. We have to be real about this. And so
Hmm.
I think that, do you see maybe, and people leaving the Abrahamic religions behind, at least in the West, because how can people get Zionism? They understand what it is, or they do more so. But then you start thinking like, well, okay, Christians, you've got your, leather bound old dusty book. You're saying this is okay based
Yeah.
on your, well, then F all y'all. I
Yeah.
don't want anything to do with it at all. You know, I can't accept excuses like that.
Yeah.
And I'm just sensing a lot of disgust and people just leaving it behind who may have had some. It could have been like they went to church when they were kids. It could have been like their family's religious, whatever. But I'm noticing a good amount of the herd just going like, I'm done with that. I've
Yeah.
seen it for what it is. I don't want it. Just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think I have seen an increase in what I would have expected, of people that are, doing away with the Abrahamic religions. The one thing that does concern me is that there seems to be about three camps in the Christian religion specifically. One of them is, they are Christian Zionists,
Mm-hmm.
Judeo-Christian through and through, love what Israel's doing, and
Yeah.
think, the apocalypse is going to be great.
Yeah.
Um, and then you have this other camp, of very like heavy. I feel like Catholicism is starting to see like a resurgence again, and that ties into like the Vatican, that attaches to like the Seven Rays of Light and the Jesuits and things, and then there seems to be this third camp. And this is a lot of like the Christian nationalism that I'm seeing,
Mm.
sort of like an increase of, where they are under the belief that, like believing in Jesus is, different from the Jewish religion, and that it's not the same God, and they love Jesus to spite Jewish people and
Yes.
the Jewish religion. And I think that they are very, very sorely mistaken, and that Christianity and basically all of it is rooted all the way back to the Old Testament, the Dead Sea Scrolls and stuff, very much like Islam, and they all still have in common that the end of the world is going to be a good thing.
Yeah.
and
And they
and
won
I
it.
yeah, and I can't tell you how many times where I will be discussing like technocracy or the biodigital convergence, and people will say, "Well, it's okay. They're gonna fail in the end because Jesus is the light and the truth." And I'm like, "Okay, so this just feels like Q, but it started 2,000 years ago."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh gosh.
that
It's
third
I'm
camp
with
I
you.
think is the most concerning.
I'm really with you on that one. I do get it. Yeah. And that third camp is kind of like the Church of MAGA in a sense, like
Yeah,
MAGA Christianity. You're like,
yeah.
oh wow, wow, okay. Well, I guess it always was pretty delusional. It's only gotten
Yeah.
better. So yeah.
And that camp has a large overlap with like the Hitler did nothing wrong crew.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, you guys are wrong. You are so off base right now.
Yeah, yeah. I hear, I get that one too. Yeah, where it's like, I've had a long time interest in like a German culture, like as like studying history, like
Mhm.
during like World War I and like the bloodlands between World War I and World War II and like World War II, and it's kind of like, I think a lot of history isn't understood, but yeah,
Mhm.
you can't say Hitler did nothing wrong. The Third
No.
Reich were kind of assholes. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like you
The
can't be like nothing.
yeah. The eugenics, the like just sending his people to war. His cooperation with like the Rothschilds. I think that World War II was basically like it was the COVID of the time to
Mm.
start breeding globalism. I think the
Mm.
global, like the concepts of globalism and the interconnectedness of all of our countries and stuff exploded after World War II, and I think a lot of that has to do with like the groundwork that was laid by FDR and Churchill and Stalin and the Axis powers themselves. I think they were sort of like the Peter Thiel of the time of like, look, these guys are
Mm.
bad. That's why we need globalism and we need to work together. And I think it did nothing but sort of like break down borders.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, it certainly did. I like to. That's very true.
Yeah,
And because I mean, as you study that more and more, deeper and deeper and deeper, you really wonder, like, well, who were the real adversaries? Crap, at the intelligence agency level, like, I'm not sure if anybody was an adversary. Yeah, I think it was kind of a
absolutely.
big show. I'm like, what? Yeah, you know, there were sides at one level, but not at the top of the pyramid. And
Right.
yeah, when you mentioned like, the advent of globalism, I've always kind of thought like over time like the Civil War was as well, because you
Yeah.
had, the bottom of the country was like, we don't like you, you're a pain in the ass, we're going to use a different currency and we're leaving,
Mm-hmm.
and the like globalists, Lincoln was like, no.
Yep.
It's like, I always thought that also was one of the, well, I guess one of the many, wars of globalism, you
Yeah.
know because like I get it, a person might not like slavery, but the South had a case on many levels, and one way or the other, I think that was like, Lincoln even said, I could care less about the slaves.
Yeah.
I care about the Union. That's it. You know,
Absolutely.
and to me, I think he was really saying, I don't care about anybody. I just care about globalism. I just
Yeah.
care about, it's like, who, I don't know who he served, but I don't think he was so great. Um,
I can be quoted as describing Lincoln as a greedy Federalist that didn't give a shit about slaves.
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's like, and people like look up the quotes, man. He did not care.
Yeah.
you know um and so I was going to ask about something you did recently. This is one of your recent lives you did on X, and it is about collective functional stupidity and like the 10 pillars of it.
Hmm.
And you mentioned an amazing book called The Stupidity Paradox: The Power of Pitfalls. No, no, the Stupidity Paradox: The Power and Pitfalls of Functional Stupidity at Work. And so um, this really struck me because I think that people, um, I'm just going to say, like, I call people the awake,
Hmm.
and it sounds a little bit egotistical, but I can't come up with a better term yet. You're like the person who went, when everyone is going like, like I had, friends texting me, saying, wow, isn't it great, we just dropped like 2 Moabs on Iran, and I'm the one going like, I don't think that's very good. Yeah, I don't
Right.
think that's good at all. I'm sorry, guys, but I can't fist bump you here. You're on
Yeah.
your own. Go invest more in Palantir. I'm not with you. So if you kind of have those beliefs, like you're not with the herd, then I think somewhere or the other you're suffering from this. You're
Yep.
aware of it and you're seeing it. And so to help people out who are probably listening to this, like, what is the gosh, I'm being stupid now. The collective function of stupidity. What is it, and why did you feel that it was important to dedicate that much time to it? I agree. It's timely. It's important.
Yeah. So it does sort of stem back to like the Milgram experiment. For people that aren't aware, that was they basically sat people in a room with an array of buttons that said, "Hey, there's somebody in the next room, and we want you to push these buttons that will send a voltage to this person." And they increased in strength to the point where it would eventually become lethal. And they basically just said, push the button, and then push the next button, and push the next button. And they discovered this phenomenon where even if there was at risk of killing some random person in the next room, that because a figure of authority was instructing somebody to do this, and explaining to them, why they needed to do this, they would just go along with it, and they would essentially compromise, any sort of preconceived principles or morality that they had, and they could chalk it up to, well, I was just doing what I was told.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that in sort of this concept called functional stupidity, which is that phenomenon that goes over how stupidity sort of evolves in a workplace, where it then becomes sort of like this collective Milgram experiment in and of itself, where when you're at work and you have employees that know that their boss is making a bad decision or something isn't done right or correctly, that they won't say anything, and whether it's fear of like reprimanded, or they are sort of dismissed, or punished in some sort of way for expressing like their own cognizant thought. If it goes against the collective, they get punished for that, and it becomes sort of like a company culture. There's this thing called toxic positivity that people like to throw around a lot, where it's like,
Mm.
even if something is negative, don't bring it up, because we don't do that here. We're like a vibes,
Oh,
company.
vibes. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what ends up happening is, over time, you have all these people that don't want to say anything and improve things because they're afraid of that. And so you essentially get like a downward spiral of competence and intelligence and culture in a workplace, as those people get elevated into higher positions. Now they're also doing the same things that they were maybe willing to call out once or twice, but then got reprimanded. But now they're in charge and they're running off those same things, and then it slowly degrades even further from there as they teach more people moving forward.
Mm.
And I think that like the way that we conduct ourselves, especially online and with social medias, that it is somewhat of like a workplace where
Yeah.
people are willing to, and we saw this a lot with like the trans movement, for example, where I know people for a fact that we're always like vehemently against some of the talking points of like the trans movement, but because they were on the left, because they labeled
Yes.
themselves a progressive, they had to do away with their own common sense, even if it was talking about like transitioning children, something that should be against people's morals. um, and they were willing to concede that because they're looking up to this authority figure, that's probably just some random person online that was willing to do the things, like punish them or out them, or get mobs to go attack them the second they step out of line, very much like that functional stupidity thing. And I think when you kind of merge those two together, that helps to explain a lot of the cognitive dissonance that we see today.
Yeah, because it seems like when reality becomes so impossible, it's like you get hit with these like paradoxes,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like you keep hearing arguments put forth that are with so much passion and violence, you know, that are untrue. I think that the untrained psyche just kind of breaks.
Yeah.
It really does. And you see that a lot, like in like the corporate world.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, like who wants to be there in the first place? And then
Yeah.
those who become like masters of the corporate world, well, you know, um, the Germans, or you could say the Nazis, if you want, during World War II, um, they identified capos in the prison
Mm-hmm.
camps. So I think it's CAPPO or CAPO.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they got very good at the psychology because they're brilliant, right? I mean, they were very smart people at the time, especially at the time,
Yeah.
and they were very good at psychology. And they realized there are some people, if you give them an armband, they will be a worse Nazi than Hitler could ever dream of being,
Yeah.
And they're like, look, there's not that many of us here to run this camp. So we're going to psychologically profile, very easy to spot, give them an armband, say you're in charge now, and they'll take care of the brutalizing.
Yeah.
You ain't got to do nothing. And so in a sense, in the corporate world, it's like, okay, who are the capos? And all right, anyone's ever worked there, this as a fact. Yeah. You know what I mean? Okay, give him an armband. Yeah, give her an armband. Okay, and then that's what you're dealing with. You're dealing
Yeah.
with like basically this very malleable person who unfortunately never processed their childhood trauma and now takes it out on you.
Yeah.
And it's either stay strong, because you need to make a living and hopefully have some exit route somehow. Or it's unfortunate, but I think either people fall prey to apathy and
Hmm.
just give up and don't care, you know, or they just sort of succumb to it. But it seems that like the tendency is just to succumb to it.
Yeah.
You know, they don't see the collective functional stupidity. They just become it, unfortunately. And
Yeah.
you go ahead.
Or it'll touch back on like the phenomenon for the Milgram experiment, where
Yeah,
they have this authority that says for the good of or for the good of the company, for the interests of the shareholders, for national security, whatever it may be, and it becomes this artificial like appeal to morality just because it is an authority. And I think we see a lot of that too, where it's like, if you don't do this, the company could go under and it'll be your fault and I'll find someone else. So it's almost like it elevates, whatever the agenda is for that group above the individual moral. And you either go along with it or you starve. Seems to be.
yeah. There tends to be a dumping of responsibility on people,
Mhm.
where it's like you're responsible for like this disaster, like you have to fix it, or you have to and people who have this like I call it like European work ethic, whatever, like a lot of us have been trained to like go like siege cities, defeat them, then rebuild them. It's like in our
Mhm.
DNA or something. So we
Yeah.
have this like I have to be responsible for this. I have to, and so I see people's like natural good nature and just feeling of responsibility, like, well, this doesn't work, I have to make it work because customers depend on it, everyone
Mhm.
else's money, income depends on it, I have to. And so they're very good at channeling people's the hole that's left of their soul, like, here, you're now responsible for this monolithic disaster, only you can fix it. And
Yep.
it's like, talk about killing people.
Yeah.
It's like, bro, I just work here, I don't give a crap.
Yeah.
What do you mean I'm responsible for everything? I'm like, I don't want to be, So
Absolutely.
it's like you're going to be driven, you're either going to succumb or be driven insane or make a run for it.
Yeah.
But I feel for the corporate employee right now. I really do. And then even in our society as well, like with like the COVID stuff, here's the mask, like,
Yep.
you better be wearing your mask. And it's like, but do you realize that, like, for one thing, no, I don't want to, it's not the law, but also what started to like kill me mentally was that I'm like, here's the deal. If you think that mask protects you from a pathogen in the air, let me spray you in the face with tear gas, okay?
Yeah.
And tell me how it worked,
Yeah.
okay? Like, that is protecting you from nothing.
Yeah.
So not only would it protect you from nothing, the answer is no, and this is all fake, and you should know that. So that's kind of like that, like, collective stupidity, where if you are able to see it, like, if you're listening to this, if you're tuning into Seven Seas lives and such, you're probably seeing it. And I just wanted to help people and be like, just keep up the fight, you know
Yeah.
because don't let them beat you. you know
Absolutely. Yeah, and they'll use all of the like appeal to authority type stuff that comes with like the functional stupidity of, oh, these people are uh, you know, prestigious scientists, so they absolutely know, like, you should just trust them inherently, do what they say. Like that, I see that same thing in the workplace with bosses, our government, like a lot of people just think that our government is supposed to be inherently moral just because they're in charge. And that is absolutely not the case. You look at that, they're the same entity that does all of these bombings and the COVID vaccines and uh, everything that you can think of. And it's like the worst, most depraved forms of humanity are what their business model is. So I
yeah,
don't know why you think the government is a good guy.
yeah. And I would say, like, we all have to sometimes like shake the collective stupidity out of ourselves. It's like
Yeah.
doing that shadow work, doing that like collective stupidity work, realizing that, I think, one of the like the moment that you say, oh, they wouldn't, well, we don't say that anymore, I really doubt it, but the moment you hear somebody say, oh, they wouldn't do that,
Yeah.
They're like, that's collective stupidity.
Yeah.
That, yes, they do.
Yeah.
Yes, they
Absolutely.
do.
Like,
They would, and they do. Yeah.
a good practice that I like to have is when it comes to like governments, these like huge financial institutions, I always just immediately jump to the worst case scenario, because it more often than not seems like that's always where it ends up anyway. But if
Mm-hmm.
I'm wrong, then I'm always just pleasantly surprised that it wasn't as bad as I thought. But it prepares me for the worst, and then I feel like I'm more capable of adapting, overcoming, resisting, avoiding, and things like that. So I always tell people like imagine the worst possible things that you can think of, and then multiply that times 10, and that is what is actually happening right now.
Oh, exactly. I love it. Yeah, it's like there's an old Russian saying, like hope for the best, plan for the worst.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. And like when it comes to the collective stupidity, I think one place where I might be, still shaking it off, where I realize, oh, I have it, is I never thought big enough. And that's something I've realized recently. I never thought big enough, where like we sometimes think the plans that are against us, that have been made against us, basically you could say that, for towards technocracy and globalism, etc. um, I even look back now and I look at Trump, for instance, since he's relevant at the moment. The whole like the Apprentice show,
Hmm.
and being this like figure who supposedly knew how to like be super successful, his books, like, how to win big or whatever it was. And
Hmm.
um, he, back then, this plan was in action. I
Yeah.
think even that whole thing, you're fired, now he's firing people, and his personality, like the groundwork was being, probably even before then, but I realized, like, wait a second, I need to start realizing that these plans are generational.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, now that makes me even more, that changes how I see things. That helps collect out, that helps to uh shake out that collective stupidity, because I go, man, back in the day when he was like, you're fired, today was already planned.
Yeah. Absolutely. Because, I mean, you have to think, while The Apprentice was happening, he had already been bailed out by the Rothschilds. He already had
Yes.
ties to Zionism. He was already having been mentored by Roy Cohn, which I think is
Mm-hmm.
like an earlier version of Epstein. Um,
Mm.
the ties to Epstein, and everything in between, his terrible business deals, his fraud with the Trump University stuff, how many bankruptcies he's had, like all of that was already happening then. So he was already on the hook with like multiple things and multiple different people, and I think that was a way to sort of endear his character, I guess, to the public, get his name out there. He went on like that wrestling, like WWF or whatever, and
Mm,
feuded
yeah.
with the owner of the company on that, who was like the biggest bad guy. And I think it was this like, let's create an outsider that's self-made
Yeah.
and basically embodies all of the things that American patriotism was for like the boomer generation.
Mm-hmm.
And then you add a little touch of Ronald Reagan and like 80s like stockbrokerism, and let him loose on the public with Palantir and Cambridge Analytica scraping everything to create his political platform, and it was a done deal.
It's a done deal. And then I think Cohn, I think he had, and hopefully I have this right, so this is alleged, but I think he also knew McCarthy, right? He was
Mm-hmm.
involved in like McCarthyism, so he was handing, like he was involved in like the creation of McCarthy. I think, if I have my timelines right, I could be wrong,
Yeah.
but then you look at Cohn, he goes way back, as you were mentioning. He's an interesting character in himself, and you know. Uh, Under a lot of rocks, you'll find him.
Yeah. Yeah.
you
I
know
mean, he was the guy blackmailing J. Edgar Hoover, who
mm,
was the head of the FBI. And it's like, well, if anybody knows anything about the FBI, if somebody else was blackmailing the guy in charge of that, what do you think the dirt is that he has? And that's the guy that taught Trump everything he knows.
yeah, and I agree, and that's the thing where I think we'll see how this Epstein thing plays out, but I do think that if people keep looking and they keep connecting the dots like you're doing with the maps, with the
Mhm.
great big web, then they're gonna it's like I think that it's like Obi-Wan Kenobi. Okay, I'm going to be goofy
Mhm.
here for a sec, right? Like when like Obi-Wan Kenobi said to Darth Vader, "By striking me down, you make me more powerful than you ever
Yep.
could have imagined." And by Trump saying the Epstein stuff is BS, he just really, I think he empowered his own demise. We'll
Oh
see
yeah,
what happens. We'll see what happens,
absolutely.
but I think there's a darn good chance of that, you know. So well, I don't want to keep you forever. It's been 2 hours. It's been amazing. You know, we've been all over the place, but you know, Seven Seas is putting out a lot of content. He does a lot of stuff. You got to check it out. And you know, I just tried to hopefully corral a little bit of it so you would get where he's coming from, and go check out Seven Seas. Seven Seas, SEES. Anything
Absolutely.
else in
Uh,
closing?
well, Craig, I want to thank you for your time. First and foremost, you know, I love like sitting down and chatting with like-minded individuals that seem to understand the way the world works, and are able to suspend what should be a disbelief, for how crazy all of this stuff is and how, you know, out of the box it is. It's like that. That's what you have to do because
Yes.
that is what is happening. And I just appreciate the work that you're doing and allowing me to come on here and speak and everything like that. Anytime you want to have me back, I'm always willing to. And if you don't mind, I'll just leave the sentiment with your
Yes.
audience. You know, things always look very bleak the further you look into them, but know that, you know, all the powers that be invest all of their time and energy and money and all of their efforts. They make these huge webs of stuff. All of it is to suppress you, make you not feel as capable as you truly are as a person, make you feel less powerful than you actually are. And I think there's merit to that because otherwise they wouldn't do it, right? They
Yeah.
wouldn't poison our foods. They wouldn't, you know, create these education systems that keep us stupid and, you know, all of these venture capital firms with billions of dollars. They wouldn't stack the deck this way if people weren't as capable as we actually are. And I think a lot of people forget that sometimes when we're going through these things and feel powerless and feel helpless and stuff. And I think that there is a lot that people can do if, you know, you just take a little bit of a responsibility, accountability for yourself, and learn all this stuff and find ways to navigate it. And I think people will surprise themselves with what they're able to achieve.
Absolutely, yeah. And yeah, definitely don't underestimate just knowledge. It has a power, it does something. Knowing is about all you can do, but it does more than we think,
Yeah.
you know? So, yeah, so tune in and learn more from Seven Seas. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you.
Bye. And stream.